Why is it that whenever the universe presents us with something we cannot explain, our first question is never, what is it? But, who made it? In 2025, an object named 3I Atlas entered our solar system from interstellar space, crossed the Sun on a one-way trajectory, and vanished forever. It did not orbit, it did not linger, and it did not belong here. Yet in the brief window during which it could be observed, 3I Atlas displayed a series of features that unsettled astronomers: an unusual trajectory, unexpected chemical behavior, extreme optical properties, and critical moments hidden from view. Individually, none of these anomalies prove anything extraordinary. Together, they expose the edges of our current models and the discomfort we feel when those models hesitate. As explanations struggle to fully converge, a familiar idea resurfaces: intelligence. Not because there is direct evidence for it, but because intelligence offers a narrative when certainty collapses. This story is not an argument for extraterrestrial technology, nor a dismissal of it. It is an examination of a fleeting cosmic encounter and of our own reflexes when faced with the unknown. Stay until the end, because 3I Atlas may have already left our solar system, but the question it raised remains very much here. When science pauses, why are we so eager to imagine that someone else is out there? Something has already passed, and the silence it left behind is doing more work than the object ever did. When the word ghost appears in this story, it is not meant to summon mystery or fear. It is not a suggestion of presence. It is a description of absence. A ghost is what remains when something moves through a system too quickly for the system to resolve it. What lingers is not the thing itself, but the disturbance it leaves in our measurements, our expectations, our confidence. 3I Atlas was never invisible. It was detected, tracked, catalogued. Its position was logged against the background of distant stars. Its light was broken apart into spectra. Its motion was fitted to equations that have worked reliably for generations. And yet, the most important moment of its journey was unavailable to us. Not because it concealed itself, but because geometry placed it behind the Sun at the exact point where its behavior would have been most revealing. Perihelion is the closest approach an object makes to the Sun. For comets, this is when activity peaks. Ices sublimate, gas escapes, dust is lifted into space. Forces that are otherwise dormant become visible. It is the moment when composition announces itself most clearly. For 3I Atlas, this moment occurred while it was hidden in solar glare. No ground-based telescope could see it. No orbiting observatory was positioned to watch directly. The data stream thinned precisely when curiosity intensified. This is where the ghost metaphor becomes necessary. Not poetic, necessary. An epistemological ghost is not defined by what it is, but by what cannot be known about it. It is an object whose most informative state exists in a blind spot. Not a deliberate one, a structural one. The universe did not hide anything from us. Our vantage point simply failed. The Sun, which makes observation possible at all, also erased the critical interval. This is not unusual in astronomy, but it is rarely so concentrated. The result is an object reconstructed from before and after, with the center missing, a passage inferred rather than witnessed, a trajectory that is mathematically clear, paired with a physical transformation that must be guessed at through indirect traces. We tend to associate ghosts with intention, with agency, with something lingering because it wants to. This association is human. It does not scale. In cosmic terms, a ghost is often just an object moving faster than our ability to interpret it, or older than our categories. or briefly aligned with our instruments before continuing on a path that does not include us. The danger begins when absence is mistaken for design. 3I Atlas did not evade observation. It did not choose a moment to disappear. It did not act. Our language strains because our intuition expects narratives with centers. We are uncomfortable with stories where the crucial scene is inaccessible, where the evidence is asymmetrical, where explanation arrives late and incomplete. This discomfort is not scientific. It is existential. We live inside systems that reward coherence. Causes precede effects. Events unfold within frames we can replay. When something violates that structure, even gently, the response is often to supply intention, to imagine purpose where there may only be trajectory, to populate the gap with actors rather than accept that the gap itself is the feature. In this story, that impulse is resisted from the beginning. 3I Atlas is not described as hiding, watching, signaling, or choosing. It does not arrive. It passes. It does not leave. It continues. It is not a visitor. It is a sample of galactic debris whose path intersected our observational capabilities for a brief interval. That intersection is the entire reason it exists in our discourse at all. This reframing matters, because the ghost is not the object. The ghost is our partial access to it. What we know is constrained by timing, angle, brightness, and the limitations of instruments built by a species that has existed for a vanishingly short interval. The data is real. The uncertainty is real. The temptation to resolve that uncertainty with narrative closure is also real. Here, the word ghost marks a boundary. It names the point where inference replaces observation, where models stretch but do not break, where imagination becomes louder precisely because measurement has gone quiet. There is a subtle psychological shift that occurs when we accept this. The universe stops behaving like a story written for us to interpret, and begins to resemble a process that unfolds regardless of our comprehension. Objects move. Fields interact. Matter follows gradients laid down long before any observer learned to look up. In that context, meaning is no longer discovered. It is assembled. Briefly, locally, with full awareness that it will not persist. 3I Atlas does not care whether it is understood. That indifference is not hostile. It is simply proportional. The object existed before the solar system formed and will continue after our instruments decay into silence. Our encounter with it occupies a narrow slice of time during which interpretation was possible at all. The ghost, then, is not a mystery demanding resolution. It is a reminder of scale, of the mismatch between human curiosity and cosmic duration, of the fact that some things pass through our world carrying histories so long that our questions cannot reach their beginning. To call it a ghost is not to elevate it. It is to admit that we are the ones arriving late. To arrive late is one thing. To realize that arrival itself was almost missed is something else entirely. 3I Atlas entered the story without announcement. There was no spectacle, no warning, no sense that a boundary had been crossed. Somewhere on Earth, a wide-field telescope scanned a familiar patch of sky, doing what it does every clear night, subtracting the known from the unknown. Stars cancelled out. Galaxies held their places. And then, briefly, something remained. The detection came through the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, a network designed not for wonder, but for vigilance. Its purpose is practical. It watches for objects that might one day matter to us in the most immediate way possible. Impact, risk, proximity. Meaning, in this context, is usually defined by danger. This object did not qualify. Its brightness was modest. Its motion was fast, but not alarming. At first, it was simply another point of light that did not belong to any catalogue. Only after additional observations did its trajectory refuse to settle into something familiar. The curve was wrong. Too open. Too steep. When the calculations converged, they did so reluctantly, as if confirming something no one was expecting to be true again so soon. Hyperbolic. Not bound. Interstellar. By the time the designation 3I Atlas was assigned, the realization had already spread quietly through professional channels. This was only the third confirmed object observed entering the solar system from outside it. Not captured, not slowed, not staying. Passing through on a one-way path, shaped long before our sun existed. The response was swift, but subdued. Telescopes pivoted. Observation windows were requested. Spectrographs were queued. There was urgency, but not panic. This was not a threat. It was an opportunity, one that could not be rescheduled. Interstellar objects do not announce their arrivals in advance. They are not inbound visitors in the human sense. They are fragments of other systems, ejected by gravitational chaos billions of years ago, drifting through the galaxy until chance, geometry brings them briefly into view. The encounter is always asymmetric. We observe. They pass. The window for 3I Atlas was narrow. Weeks, not months. Days, not weeks, for certain measurements. Each night, lost to weather or scheduling constraints, permanently erased a portion of the record. There would be no second pass, no return apparition, no chance to correct early assumptions once the object receded beyond detectability. This scarcity shaped everything that followed. As data accumulated, attention expanded outward from the scientific community into the public sphere. News outlets noted the rarity. Social media accelerated speculation. Images circulated that suggested clarity we did not have. Interpretations ran ahead of measurements. The object began to acquire a presence disproportionate to its physical influence. This is a familiar pattern. When something appears briefly and incompletely, it invites projection. Gaps in knowledge are quickly filled with confidence. Uncertainty is uncomfortable, especially when time is short. The temptation is to decide what the object must be before it leaves. But the reality was quieter. 3I Atlas never came close to Earth. Its distance at closest approach remained vast, separated by tens of millions of kilometers. There was no gravitational disturbance, no tidal influence, no measurable interaction beyond photons reaching our detectors. The solar system barely noticed its passage at all. And yet, for those watching, the moment carried weight, because what mattered was not proximity, but irreversibility. Every observation was happening after the object had already passed the point of greatest interest. Perihelion had occurred unseen. Whatever transformation took place, there was already over. The coma we observed was an aftermath. The gases detected were echoes. We were reading the smoke, not the fire. There is a particular unease that comes with this realization. Not fear, not excitement. A quieter sensation, the awareness that the most important part of an encounter has already happened, and that nothing we do now can change that. We are left interpreting residue, knowing that the original event is gone forever. This is not unique to astronomy. It appears in human life as well. Decisions understood only after their consequences unfold. Moments recognized as pivotal only in retrospect. Meaning arrives late, if at all. In the case of 3I Atlas, the lateness was structural, built into the geometry of the solar system, built into the speed of the object, built into the fact that the universe does not align its most interesting moments with our capacity to observe them. The object moved quickly, faster than anything bound to the sun at that distance. Its velocity carried the signature of a long journey through the galaxy, shaped by encounters with stars long extinguished. Each hour, it receded further, its brightness dropping, its signal thinning into noise. Astronomers worked against this fading with discipline rather than drama. Papers were drafted cautiously. Claims were hedged. Anomalies were noted without amplification. The language remained restrained, even as curiosity intensified. Outside those circles, restraint was harder to maintain. The phrase interstellar object carries narrative weight. It suggests elsewhere. It invites comparison. It tempts us to imagine origins as stories rather than processes. When certainty is incomplete, imagination offers coherence. It supplies a center, an author. But the encounter itself resisted that framing. There was no interaction, no exchange, no acknowledgement. The object passed through the inner solar system the way wind passes through an open window, indifferent to the structure it briefly occupies. This indifference is often misread as emptiness. In fact, it is density of another kind, a density of time, of accumulated motion, of histories that do not converge on us. 3i Atlas did not enter our story because it mattered to the universe. It entered because our instruments happened to be looking in the right direction at the right moment, during a period when our species has developed the ability to notice such things at all. That coincidence is easy to overlook. We speak as if discovery is inevitable, as if the universe has been waiting. But the truth is more fragile. For most of cosmic history, this object passed through space unnoticed. It will continue to do so long after our attention fades. Our brief awareness of it is the anomaly. There is something quietly destabilizing in that fact. It suggests that significance is not a property of objects, but of encounters. That meaning is not carried by the universe toward us, but extracted temporarily through perception. When perception ends, so does the meaning we assigned. As 3i Atlas moved outward, beyond the reach of mid-sized telescopes, then beyond the largest, the data stream slowed and then stopped. Not with a final image, not with resolution, just with diminishing signal until there was nothing left to say with confidence. The object did not leave dramatically. It simply became unobservable, and in that fading, a subtle shift occurred. The encounter transformed from an event into a memory, from data into interpretation. What remained was not the object, but the discomfort of having glimpsed something vast, ancient, and transient all at once. A reminder that the universe does not pause when we begin to pay attention. That fading did not mark an ending so much as a clarification. Once the light thinned enough to disappear, the path it had traced remained, clean and irreversible. There are only a few ways an object can move through the solar system. Most are familiar. Planets follow closed loops, bound to the sun by gravity that has held since formation. Comets stretch those loops into long ellipses, disappearing into the cold outskirts before returning again, altered but recognizable. Even fragments flung outward by planetary encounters usually remain tethered, their futures written as variations on return. 3i Atlas followed none of these patterns. Its path was open, not wide, not looping, not delayed. A single arc, bent slightly as it crossed the sun's gravitational field, then straightening again as it departed. This shape has a name that carries more weight than it first appears to: hyperbolic. A hyperbolic trajectory is not just a description of motion. It is a declaration of origin and fate. It means the object arrived with more kinetic energy than the sun could capture. It means the solar system was never its home, and it means it will never become one. This is not a subtle distinction. Bound objects can be studied across generations. They return. They allow revision. An interstellar object offers no such patience. It enters once, leaves once, and takes its full history with it. The mathematics of this are precise. When astronomers fit the observations of 3i Atlas to orbital solutions, the eccentricity exceeded the threshold that marks escape, not by a margin that could be explained away by measurement error or unseen perturbations, by enough to make the conclusion unavoidable, This object was passing through, not falling in. What this tells us is deceptively simple. 3I Atlas was not shaped by the sun. Its composition, its structure, its surface history were set elsewhere, under different stellar conditions, orbiting a different star or stars that may no longer exist. The solar system did not create it. It merely intercepted it. This interception was brief because the object was moving fast. Faster than typical comets at comparable distances. Faster because it was not descending from a distant bound reservoir, but carrying momentum accumulated over an interstellar journey that likely lasted billions of years. Velocity, in this context, becomes a kind of biography. Every encounter with a star slightly alters a trajectory. Every close pass exchanges energy over immense spans of time. These small changes accumulate. An object like 3I Atlas is the end result of countless gravitational negotiations, most of them forgotten by the galaxy that produced them. There is something unsettling in realizing how little the solar system contributed to that history. For a short interval, the sun bent the path. That is all. No capture, no retention. Just a deflection, measured in degrees rather than revolutions. This fleeting interaction is enough to define the object as interstellar, but it is not enough to make it familiar. The term interstellar often carries an implicit drama. It suggests distance, otherness, the unknown. But in dynamical terms, it is almost mundane. The Milky Way is full of debris. Planet formation is inefficient. Young systems eject far more material than they retain. Every star sheds fragments during its early chaos. Over time, those fragments fill the space between stars like dust fills a room. Most of that dust is never noticed. Only rarely does geometry align so that one of these fragments passes close enough to a star with observers capable of recognizing what it is. Rarer still that those observers are ourselves, living in a moment when detection systems are sensitive enough to catch such a brief crossing. This rarity tempts us to elevate the event, to treat it as exceptional, but from the perspective of the galaxy, 3I Atlas is not special. It is representative, one of perhaps trillions of similar objects wandering between stars, silent and unobserved. The special condition is not the object, it is the intersection. Understanding this requires a shift in how we think about motion. We tend to imagine space as static and objects as moving through it. In reality, everything is moving. Stars orbit the galactic center. Gas clouds shear and collapse. Even the sun carries its planets along a vast circuit that takes hundreds of millions of years to complete. 3I Atlas was not aiming for us. There was no approach vector chosen with intent. Its path crossed ours because two motions overlapped in time. That overlap is all. This realization strips away a certain comfort. We prefer to believe that encounters happen because they matter. That significance draws things together, but the universe operates on coincidence scaled to immensity. Paths cross because they can, not because they should. There is an echo of this in human experience. Lives intersect briefly. Conversations occur once and never again. Meaning is often assigned after the fact, constructed from proximity rather than design. We mistake alignment for purpose because randomness at scale feels intolerable. The hyperbolic path of 3I Atlas confronts us with that intolerance. It offers no reassurance, no suggestion of return, no narrative arc beyond passage. It also places this object alongside two others that share the same classification, but not the same character. One appeared elongated and tumbling, its behavior defying easy explanation. Another behaved more like a traditional comet, active and chemically familiar. 3I Atlas occupies a different position among them, not because it resolves their mysteries, but because it multiplies them. Its size appeared larger. Its activity evolved differently. Its direction of approach suggested a population older than the thin disk of the galaxy where our sun resides. Each difference adds texture, but none offer closure. What binds these objects together is not similarity, but implication. If we have seen 3 within such a short observational window, then there must be many more. The galaxy is not empty between stars. It is crowded with relics of formation, migration, and ejection. Most of these relics will never intersect a planetary system. Most will never pass close to a star. Most will never be seen. This abundance forces another recalibration. We often think of our solar system as a stable environment, occasionally disturbed by intruders. In reality, it moves through a medium rich with debris. Interstellar objects are not invaders. They are part of the background through which we travel. The hyperbolic trajectory makes this unavoidable. It reminds us that the solar system is not a closed world. It is porous, open to exchange, not of messages or visitors, but of matter and motion. There is a quiet humility in recognizing this. Our planetary neighborhood feels permanent because our lives are short. The orbits seem fixed because we do not witness their full evolution. But on galactic timescales, even stars are transient. Systems form, disrupt, and dissolve. 3I Atlas is a fragment of that larger churn. Its path through our system was a minor perturbation in a journey that began long before Earth formed and will continue long after it is unrecognizable. To see such an object is to be reminded of our position in time. Not central, not early, not late enough to see the end. We exist during a brief window when matter still moves freely, when stars still burn, when fragments still wander. The hyperbolic arc is not dramatic. It is efficient. It does not curve back to invite further study. It refuses intimacy, and perhaps that is its most unsettling feature. It offers no relationship, no reciprocity, only evidence that the universe is full of trajectories that intersect ours once, briefly, and without consequence beyond what we choose to take from them. 3I Atlas passed through the solar system as if through a corridor. The doors remained open, the walls unchanged. When it was gone, nothing marked the passage except our awareness that, for a moment, we were not alone in the way we thought we were. Not because someone arrived, but because something reminded us that we are always moving through a space that does not belong to us. That corridor opens into time as easily as it opens into space. Once the path is accepted as one way, the question shifts from where it is going to how long it has already been moving. The phrase 7 billion years old sounds precise. It sounds authoritative. It sounds like a measurement that could be written on a label and affixed to the object itself, as if age were a property embedded in matter the way mass or density is. But in astronomy, age rarely works that way. It is not read directly. It is inferred, bracketed, and often misunderstood. When scientists speak of 3I Atlas as potentially 7 billion years old, they are not claiming to have dated the object the way a tree is dated by its rings. There is no birthday hidden in its surface, no internal clock waiting to be read. What they are describing is something more diffuse and less intuitive, the likely antiquity of the material from which it formed, and the galactic environment that shaped its trajectory long before the sun existed. To understand this, age must be loosened from the idea of origin as a single event. In the cosmos, age is often a distribution rather than a point. Matter is recycled. Atoms pass through stars, clouds, disks, and debris fields. What forms at one moment may contain components forged billions of years earlier. The Milky Way itself is old, older than our solar system by several billion years. It did not form all at once. It assembled gradually, through mergers, accretion, and long periods of relative calm. Within it are populations of stars that differ not just in age, but in motion and composition. These differences leave traces that can be read, if carefully. One such population is known as the galactic thick disk. It is thicker, more vertically extended than the thin disk where the Sun resides. Its stars tend to move with higher velocities relative to the galactic plane. They are typically poorer in heavy elements, because they formed earlier, before multiple generations of stellar recycling enriched the galaxy. If an object like 3I Atlas carries kinematic signatures consistent with that older population, then it suggests a formation epoch far removed from our own. Not 7 billion years as a claim etched in stone, but 7 billion years as a reasonable inference drawn from motion, chemistry, and galactic context. This distinction matters because numbers carry weight. They compress vast uncertainty into something that feels manageable, but deep time resists management. It overwhelms intuition. 7 billion years is not something the mind can hold as duration. It is a label for a span so long that causality itself begins to blur. For comparison, Earth is approximately 4.5 billion years old. Life here emerged relatively early, but complex multicellular life occupies only a small fraction of that history. Human civilization appears at the very end, a thin layer atop an ancient planet. Written history barely registers against the geological record. To imagine material that predates Earth by billions of years is to step outside the scale where human narratives function. It is to confront a timeline in which our species is not late in the day, but late in the minute. Yet even this comparison can mislead, because the age attributed to 3I Atlas is not the age of a single object persisting unchanged through time. It is the age of a lineage of matter, of fragments shaped by environments that no longer exist, of dust and ice that coalesced under conditions different from those that formed our planets. In this sense, age becomes less about endurance and more about continuity. The object we observed is a temporary configuration. It may not have existed in its current form for 7 billion years. It may have been assembled, broken, reassembled, its surface altered by radiation, collisions, and thermal cycling, its core modified by forces we can only model indirectly. What persists is not the object, but the process. There is a quiet irony here. We seek age as a way to anchor significance. Older feels deeper, more meaningful. But the universe does not preserve things because they matter. It preserves what survives the conditions it encounters. Longevity is not a reward. It is an outcome. This reframes the number entirely. 7 billion years does not mean 3I Atlas has been waiting, intact, to be discovered. It means the galaxy has been producing and dispersing material for that long, and that some fraction of it avoids destruction long enough to wander. In that wandering, meaning does not accumulate. It dissipates. For humans, time often enriches. Memory deepens. Experience layers significance onto events. In cosmic terms, time erodes specificity. Details are lost. Histories smear. What remains is motion and composition. Stripped of narrative, 3I Atlas carries no record of the star it formed around. If such a star ever existed, it does not remember the ejection that set it adrift. It does not bear witness to the galaxy's youth. These stories exist only as probabilities in our models, and yet, the impulse to imagine them is strong. Perhaps because we recognize something familiar in this condition. We, too, inherit matter older than ourselves. Our bodies are assembled from atoms forged in ancient stars. Our lives are brief configurations in a much longer process. We search for origins not because they define us, but because they offer orientation. The danger is assuming that orientation is reciprocal, that the universe offers context in return. It does not. 3I Atlas does not validate our timelines. It does not confirm our place. It simply demonstrates that the galaxy was active long before our sun ignited. And that material from that era still moves freely through space. If Earth is a modern city, bustling and illuminated, then 3I Atlas is not a visitor from another metropolis. It is a brick, weathered, displaced, manufactured in a civilization that collapsed before our city was planned, before the land it sits on existed at all. The brick does not know it was once part of a structure. It does not care where it ends up. Its journey through our streets is incidental. There is a subtle existential pressure in accepting this. It undermines the idea that age confers wisdom, or that survival implies purpose. The object is old, not because it endured intentionally, but because it avoided annihilation by chance and circumstance. In that sense, its antiquity is not comforting. It is destabilizing. It suggests that the universe has been unfolding for billions of years without accumulating meaning. That vast spans of time pass without witnesses. That our emergence does not complete a story, but interrupts one. When we say 7 billion years old, we are not naming a fact about 3I Atlas so much as exposing a limit in ourselves. We need numbers to gesture at immensity, even when those numbers dissolve under scrutiny. The object's age, like its trajectory, resists closure. It points backward into a galaxy we cannot observe directly, and forward into a future where it will continue long after our capacity to notice fades. What remains is not certainty, but scale, and the uneasy recognition that we are interpreting an ancient process that did not anticipate interpretation and does not require it to continue. Scale, once accepted, does not grant clarity. It only sharpens the question of what remains when looking is all we are allowed to do. What we actually saw of 3I Atlas was not an object in the ordinary sense. There was no surface to examine, no silhouette to trace, no stable form to return to night after night. What we observed were photons filtered through distance, motion, and interference. A temporary alignment between a moving body and instruments designed to extract meaning from faint light. Most of what circulated publicly during the encounter did not come from telescopes at all. It came from imagination, clean renderings, sharp contours, artist impressions mistaken for evidence. These images were not lies, but they were not observations. They filled a void created by the limits of perception. The actual data was fragmentary. Points of light measured against reference stars. Slight variations in brightness over time. Spectral lines that appeared, faded, shifted. Polarization signals that hinted at texture without revealing shape. Everything was indirect. This is normal in astronomy. But normal does not mean satisfying. 3I Atlas was never resolved into a disk. Even with the largest ground-based telescopes, it remained unresolved. Its apparent size far smaller than what would be required for direct imaging. Space-based observatories offered different advantages, but none could overcome the fundamental constraint of distance combined with speed. The object was too far, too fast, and too fleeting. What we saw instead was its coma. As the object approached the sun, volatile materials began to sublimate. Gases escaped, carrying dust with them, forming a diffuse cloud around a nucleus that remained hidden. This cloud reflected and emitted light, making the object visible at all. Without it, 3I Atlas would likely have passed unnoticed. A dark fragment against a darker background. The coma is not the object. It is a response. It tells us something about composition, temperature, and activity. But it also obscures. The nucleus, which holds the most direct record of formation, remained concealed behind the very process that announced its presence. This introduces a quiet irony. The closer the object came to the sun, the more active it became. The more active it became, the less we could see of its core. The moment of greatest revelation was also the moment of greatest concealment. And then there was Perihelion, that closest approach. The point where solar heating peaked, occurred while 3I Atlas was lost in the sun's glare from Earth's perspective. No optical telescope could safely observe it. No continuous record exists of how its activity evolved at that critical moment. We infer what happened based on what came before and what followed. Inference is not failure. It is the backbone of science. But it must be handled with care. From the spectra we did obtain, certain molecules were identified, carbon-bearing compounds, water vapor appearing later than expected, traces of metals in gaseous form that challenged existing assumptions about sublimation processes. Each detection was cautious, accompanied by error bars and caveats. None of this produced a portrait. It produced constraints. Polarization measurements added another layer. The way light scattered by the coma suggested particles with unusual properties, perhaps more compact or more irregular than those typically observed in solar system comets. This hinted at a different formation environment, but did not specify which one, even the tail. That most iconic feature of comets resisted simplicity. At times, it appeared oriented in ways that defied naive expectations, shaped by interactions between outgassing, radiation pressure, and solar wind conditions that were themselves variable. Every measurement answered one question and raised another. This is not a flaw. It is the texture of real observation. The difficulty arises when this texture is flattened into certainty, when the provisional becomes definitive, when the public story outruns the data. 3I Atlas was observed intensively. But briefly, the observing arc covered a narrow range of heliocentric distances. Each dataset was a snapshot, not a sequence. Stitching them together required assumptions about continuity that may or may not hold. This uncertainty is not scandalous. It is expected. The problem is that uncertainty is often misinterpreted as ignorance, and ignorance as permission to speculate freely. Here, restraint matters. What we can say is limited. The object was active. It released gas and dust. Its composition differed in measurable ways from known comets. Its behavior changed with solar distance. Its nucleus remained unresolved. Its most critical phase was unobserved. What we cannot say is far more extensive. We cannot describe its shape. We cannot confirm its internal structure. We cannot reconstruct its full thermal history. We cannot trace its exact origin to a specific star or region of the galaxy. This gap between what is known and what is imagined is where discomfort grows. Humans are not well adapted to living with partial pictures. We prefer coherence. We want stories that close. When closure is denied, we often create it. But astronomy resists this impulse. It forces us to accept that observation is always conditional. That knowledge arrives filtered through distance, time, and instrument sensitivity. That some objects will never be fully known, no matter how much attention they attract. There is a parallel here that is difficult to ignore. Much of human understanding operates in the same way. We see fragments of each other. We infer motivations from actions. We build identities from limited data. The interior remains hidden, even as external signals suggest complexity. Meaning, then, is not something revealed in full. It is assembled from traces. 3I Atlas becomes a mirror in this sense, not because it reflects us, but because it exposes how we respond to incomplete information. The temptation to fill gaps, the discomfort with ambiguity, the desire to turn observation into narrative. Science, at its best, resists that desire. It documents uncertainty rather than erasing it. It records what is seen without demanding that what is unseen conform to expectation. This is why so many images associated with 3I Atlas are misleading, not because they are false, but because they imply a level of access we did not have. They suggest proximity, familiarity, completion. The reality was distance, mediation, absence. What we saw was light altered by interaction with matter, filtered through atmosphere or vacuum, detected by sensors that translate photons into numbers. Those numbers were then interpreted through models that carry assumptions shaped by previous observations of different objects. This chain is long. Each link introduces possibility for error, but also for insight. The key is not to pretend the chain is shorter than it is. 3i Atlas did not offer itself up for inspection. It did not slow. It did not brighten dramatically. It did not behave in ways that simplified analysis. It remained stubbornly itself, whatever that self may be. There is a quiet dignity in that. In the end, observation without certainty is not a deficiency. It is a condition, one that applies not just to interstellar objects, but to our position in the universe. We are always observing from somewhere, always limited by perspective, always interpreting signals that have traveled longer than our histories. 3i Atlas passed through that condition briefly, leaving behind data that refuses to resolve into comfort. What remains is not an image, but an awareness that seeing is not the same as knowing, and that knowing is often partial by necessity. The universe does not yield itself all at once. It offers fragments, and then it moves on. Fragments invite pattern. Once certainty thins, the mind begins arranging what remains. Not maliciously, but instinctively. One of the first things noticed about 3i Atlas was not what it was made of, but how it arrived. Its approach appeared close to the plane in which the planets orbit. The flattened disk that defines the solar system's architecture. This detail was small, easily overlooked, yet it carried disproportionate psychological weight. Interstellar space allows almost limitless possibilities of approach. Objects can arrive from above, below, sideways, tilted at any angle imaginable. There is no preferred direction. The galaxy does not funnel debris neatly into planetary planes, and yet, here was an object from beyond the solar system, arriving in a way that visually echoed the structure of the system it was passing through. This alignment was not exact. It was not perfect. It did not trace the ecliptic as a planet would, but it was close enough to be noticed, and once noticed, difficult to ignore. The discomfort it produced had little to do with physics and much to do with coincidence. Human perception is finely tuned to detect patterns, even where none are intended. This ability is ancient. It kept our ancestors alive. It allowed them to infer threats, predict behavior, and navigate uncertainty. But it also comes with a cost. When patterns appear in contexts where intention is unlikely, the mind still reacts as if meaning is present. In the case of 3i Atlas, the question arose quietly at first. What are the odds? This is a dangerous question when asked after the fact. The alignment does not violate any physical law. Given enough interstellar objects passing through the solar system over enough time, some will arrive near the planetary plane. This is not surprising statistically. It is only surprising emotionally, because we encountered one of them during a period when we were watching closely. Probability feels different when it selects us. The second anomaly followed naturally from the first. The trajectory did not just align visually. It intersected the inner solar system in a way that maximized observability. At least initially, it crossed regions dense with observational infrastructure. Telescopes, already trained on near-Earth space, were well positioned to detect it. Again, this is not impossible. The detection systems are designed to look where objects are most likely to matter to us. The fact that an interstellar object was found there reflects our priorities more than the object's intent. But intent is difficult to suppress. When coincidences stack, even loosely, they create a sense of narrative compression. The feeling that too many things have lined up too neatly. That randomness, while theoretically sufficient, no longer feels emotionally adequate. The third anomaly was subtler, but more potent. The timing, 3I Atlas was detected after earlier interstellar objects had already recalibrated expectations. It arrived in an era of heightened sensitivity, both technological and cultural. Survey systems had improved. Data pipelines were faster. Public awareness was primed. The idea of interstellar visitors, once fringe, had entered mainstream discourse. Had the object passed through a century earlier, it would have gone unnoticed. Had it arrived a century later, it might have been characterized more completely. Its arrival coincided with a narrow window in which detection was possible, but understanding remained incomplete. This temporal alignment fed the sense of significance. It felt as though the object arrived at exactly the wrong moment to be explained fully, and exactly the right moment to be imagined freely. These three elements together created a tension that is difficult to quantify. None of them constitute evidence of design. None of them require extraordinary explanation. And yet, together, they strain our comfort with chance. This strain reveals something important, not about the object, but about us. We are uneasy with coincidences that brush against our sense of centrality. We tolerate randomness easily when it occurs elsewhere, but when it intersects our systems, our instruments, our time, we begin to suspect that randomness is insufficient as an explanation. The universe does not share this discomfort. From a cosmic perspective, the solar system is not a privileged target. It is one of countless systems orbiting the galactic center. Interstellar objects do not recognize planes or priorities. They move along trajectories determined by past interactions, indifferent to where they pass. The appearance of alignment is a projection of our frame of reference. This is difficult to internalize because our frame feels absolute. We live inside it. The planetary plane defines our sky. It organizes our maps. When something enters that plane from outside, it feels intrusive. Even though the intrusion exists only relative to us, there is an existential undercurrent here that is hard to avoid. We are always tempted to believe that what intersects our experience does so because it belongs there, or because it is meant to be noticed. But meaning is not a force that shapes trajectories. It is a response we generate after trajectories intersect us. The discomfort around 3I Atlas did not arise because the data pointed clearly towards something extraordinary. It arose because the data refused to remain neatly ordinary while also refusing to justify extraordinary conclusions. Alignment without precision, timing without intention, geometry without message. This is the space where speculation thrives. Some observers noted that if one were to design an artificial probe intended to pass through a planetary system without stopping, a shallow approach near the planetary plane would be efficient. It would maximize observational opportunities while minimizing interaction. This thought is not unreasonable. It is also not evidence. It is a hypothetical layered onto coincidence. The problem is not that such ideas are raised. The problem is when they are mistaken for implications rather than reflections of our narrative instincts. We imagine design because design produces stories with agents, motives, and conclusions. Randomness produces none of these. But the universe does not owe us stories. 3I Atlas does not confirm or deny anything by its alignment. It does not argue for intelligence or against it. It simply exposes how easily geometry can be misread when viewed through a human lens hungry for coherence. This hunger is not a flaw. It is a condition. We exist in a world where survival once depended on reading intent into ambiguous signals. That reflex does not switch off when we turn our attention to the stars. Yet, astronomy demands a different discipline. It requires us to sit with coincidence without resolving it, to accept that some alignments mean nothing beyond themselves, to allow patterns to exist without assuming authorship. There is a quiet discomfort in this acceptance. It leaves us without a center, without reassurance that what we notice matters beyond our noticing. 3I Atlas passed through a geometry that felt intimate, not because it was chosen, but because it intersected the structures we use to orient ourselves. The feeling of too much coincidence arises when orientation is mistaken for intention. In the end, the anomalies of alignment, geometry, and timing do not point outward toward intelligence. They point inward, toward the limits of our tolerance for randomness in a universe that operates without regard for our sense of narrative balance. The object did not arrive to be seen. We happened to be looking, and that difference, once acknowledged, leaves us standing in a space where meaning must be handled carefully, or not at all. When geometry refuses to explain itself, attention drifts inward, toward composition, as if matter might confess what motion will not. The first chemical signal to emerge from 3I Atlas was unexpected not because it was exotic, but because of when it appeared. Carbon dioxide dominated the early coma, asserting itself at distances from the sun where water ice typically remains inert. This alone would not be strange if observed in isolation. Carbon dioxide is volatile. It sublimates at lower temperatures than water. In sufficiently cold formation environments, it can become trapped beneath insulating layers of dust and ice, waiting for modest heating to escape. But context matters. In most solar system comets, carbon dioxide is present, yet rarely dominant, so early and so clearly. Water usually announces itself first, defining the activity profile as the comet approaches the inner regions. With 3I Atlas, this sequence appeared inverted. Carbon dioxide led, water lagged behind. The implication was subtle but unsettling. It suggested a thermal and compositional history different from what we consider typical. Not impossible, just unfamiliar. As the object moved closer to the sun, water vapor did eventually appear. Its emergence was sudden, almost abrupt, as if a threshold had been crossed. One moment, water signatures were weak or absent. The next, they were unmistakable. This transition resisted simple explanation. One possibility is stratification. Layers within the nucleus composed of different ices, activated at different temperatures. Another is surface processing. Radiation over long interstellar journeys can alter outer layers, sealing volatiles beneath until sufficient heating fractures the crust. None of these explanations require novelty beyond physics we already understand. But they do require us to accept that formation environments vary widely, and that our solar system represents only one narrow sample of what is possible. Still, the pattern was uncomfortable. The order in which substances revealed themselves created a sense of misalignment, as though the object were speaking a chemical language we only partially recognize. Not alien, in the sensational sense. Alien in the literal one, originating elsewhere. Then came the metals. Spectral analysis revealed gaseous nickel in the coma, without a corresponding detection of iron at comparable levels. This was not a claim made lightly. The identification was cautious, repeated, cross-checked. Nickel, liberated into gas phase under solar heating, appeared to dominate where iron would normally be expected. In solar system, comets, metals are rare in gaseous form. When they appear, iron typically leads. It is more abundant. Its chemistry is better understood in these contexts. Nickel is present, but secondary. The ratio observed around 3I Atlas inverted this expectation. Again, this was not impossible. Nickel can sublimate under certain conditions. Laboratory experiments and models show that specific compounds can release nickel preferentially, depending on temperature, bonding, and grain structure. But seeing this behavior in an interstellar object, under observational constraints already stretched thin, forced a pause. Not a leap, a pause. Because what matters here is not the anomaly itself, but the accumulation, carbon dioxide leading where water should. Water appearing abruptly rather than gradually. Nickel asserting itself where iron recedes. each deviation small, each explainable in isolation. Together, they produced friction against our mental templates. It is tempting, at this point, to ask what kind of environment would produce such chemistry. Warmer disks? Colder ones? Regions enriched by specific stellar populations? Theoretical work suggests that disks around older, metal-poor stars can trap volatiles differently, that early galactic environments may produce bodies with compositions unlike anything common today. If 3I Atlas originated in such an environment, its chemistry would not be a message. It would be a residue. But residues invite interpretation. We are drawn to composition because it feels intimate. Motion is abstract. Chemistry feels closer to substance, to the idea that matter carries memory. We imagine that what something is made of tells us what it has been through. This is only partly true. Matter does not remember in the way we do. It does not encode narrative. It responds to conditions. When those conditions change, the response changes with them. There is no intention in this. No accumulation of meaning, only physical consequence. And yet, we persist in reading significance into chemical patterns. Perhaps because we ourselves are chemical systems, shaped by our environments, bearing traces of histories we did not choose. The chemistry of 3I Atlas unsettled us not because it was mysterious, but because it resisted easy assimilation into our existing categories. It forced us to confront the possibility that our solar system's comets are not representative, that what we consider normal is local. This realization carries existential weight. If our reference points are parochial, then our intuitions about what is common may be wrong. We may be surrounded by phenomena that feel strange only because we lack sufficient exposure. In that case, the anomaly is not the object, but our limited experience. The temptation, again, is to reach for agency, to imagine that unusual chemistry implies construction, refinement, or purpose. But chemistry does not need purpose to be complex. It only needs time and variation. 3I Atlas has had both. Consider the journey implied by its interstellar status. Billions of years moving through a galaxy where radiation fields vary, where close stellar passages occasionally spike temperatures, where collisions, though rare, still occur. Each encounter modifies surfaces. Each heating event alters binding energies. Each cooling phase locks in new configurations. By the time such an object enters our solar system, it is not pristine. It is processed, not designed. Processed. This distinction is easy to blur when anomalies cluster. We are uncomfortable with systems that behave coherently without intention. But the universe is full of such systems. Stars form structures without blueprints. Galaxies develop patterns without planners. Chemistry organizes itself into complexity without foresight. 3I Atlas participates in this pattern. Its chemistry does not ask to be understood. It simply reacts. There is also a deeper discomfort underlying the focus on anomalies. If something behaves too differently, it threatens the stability of our frameworks. It suggests that our models, while successful locally, may not generalize. That the universe is more varied than our categories allow. This threatens not just scientific confidence, but a quieter assumption that understanding accumulates steadily, narrowing uncertainty over time. But sometimes understanding expands uncertainty. Sometimes new data does not resolve questions, but multiplies them. The carbon dioxide, the water, the nickel. Each observation widened the space of possibility rather than collapsing it. Each forced acknowledgement that our picture of interstellar objects is still embryonic. This is not failure, it is early observation. We are tempted to forget how young this field is. The study of interstellar objects as direct samples of other planetary systems barely exists. We have encountered only a handful. Each one will likely appear strange. not because it is exceptional, but because it is unfamiliar. In that light, the chemistry of 3I Atlas becomes less a signal of anomaly and more a reminder of scale. There are billions of stars, countless disks, innumerable pathways through which matter can assemble and disperse. Our solar system is one experiment among many. The existential unease creeps in quietly here. If the universe is this varied, this indifferent to our norms, then meaning cannot be derived from conformity. There is no baseline to compare against, no central template. We exist not at the center of chemical possibility, but at one edge of it. 3I Atlas does not tell us who we are. It tells us that what we know is contingent, that our definitions of normal are provisional, that the universe is under no obligation to reflect our expectations back to us. The metals in the mist do not point toward intelligence. They point toward history without narrative, toward processes that unfold without concern for interpretation. When we look at 3I Atlas and feel unsettled by its chemistry, we are not responding to danger or revelation. We are responding to the erosion of familiarity. And perhaps that erosion is the most honest signal the object offers. Not a message from elsewhere, but a quiet confirmation that elsewhere does not resemble here, and does not need to. The object passed through, carrying matter shaped by distant conditions, releasing it briefly into sunlight, then reclaiming it as it moved on. The chemistry dissipated, the mist thinned. What remains is not an answer, but a widened sense of what existence can look like when it unfolds beyond our frame of reference. In that widening, certainty does not vanish. It simply loses its privilege. As chemistry loosened our grip on familiarity, light itself began to behave in ways that felt less cooperative, as if even reflection had decided not to reassure us. Polarization is not an intuitive concept. It is not something the eye detects directly. It is a property of light, revealed only when measured carefully. When scattered photons are examined for how their waves align after interacting with matter. In astronomy, polarization is a diagnostic. It tells us about texture, shape, and structure at scales far too small to image. When light reflects off dust grains in a comet's coma, the degree and direction of polarization carry information about those grains, their size, their porosity, their composition. In solar system comets, polarization follows patterns that are now familiar, even comforting in their consistency. As phase angle changes, polarization shifts in predictable ways. 3I Atlas did not follow those patterns. Its polarization measurements reached values that were not merely unusual, but extreme. Negative polarization appeared at levels that exceeded what had been recorded for any comet observed before. This was not a marginal deviation. It was a clear departure from precedent. Negative polarization occurs when scattered light becomes polarized, perpendicular to what is expected under simple scattering models. It implies complex interactions between light and matter. Highly irregular grains, possibly compact structures, perhaps surfaces shaped by processes unlike those common in our solar system. The immediate reaction was caution. Polarization data is sensitive. It depends on observing geometry, calibration, and assumptions baked into interpretation, but repeated measurements reinforced the signal. This was not noise. Still, the signal did not explain itself. Models could reproduce aspects of the polarization only by invoking dust properties at the edge of what had been previously considered. Grains that were either unusually compact or arranged in fractal aggregates with unfamiliar geometry. Neither option was impossible. Both were unsettling. Because polarization does not lie easily. It does not respond to imagination. It responds to structure. Here again, the temptation arose to assign intention. Extreme polarization feels engineered. It suggests surfaces shaped deliberately. But this is a projection. Nature is capable of producing extremes without guidance, given enough variation and time. 3I Atlas likely experienced conditions far harsher and more varied than those shaping typical comets. Long exposure to cosmic radiation can alter grain surfaces. Thermal cycling across immense spans can anneal structures. Collisions at interstellar velocities can compact material in ways rare within bound systems. The result is dust that behaves differently when struck by sunlight, not because it was designed to, but because it endured. Endurance, however, is often mistaken for purpose. The second visual anomaly intensified this misinterpretation. At certain points during observation, the object appeared to display a tail oriented toward the sun rather than away from it. This ran counter to expectations so deeply ingrained that it borders on intuition. Comet tails point away from the sun. Radiation pressure and solar wind ensure this. It is one of the simplest lessons taught about these objects. And yet, here was something that seemed to violate that rule. Images circulated rapidly. Headlines followed. The phrase "backward tail" took hold. Charged with implication, it suggested defiance, reversal, an object behaving incorrectly. But physics is less dramatic than language. What was observed was not a single tail, but a complex structure shaped by multiple forces acting simultaneously. Dust does not always behave like gas. Larger particles can lag behind the nucleus, forming features that appear sunward depending on viewing angle. Changes in outgassing direction, combined with low solar wind pressure at specific times, can create transient structures that seem to contradict expectation. In the case of 3I Atlas, the sun was relatively quiet during early activity. Solar wind conditions were weak. Radiation pressure alone was insufficient to immediately dominate dust dynamics. The result was a morphology that, from Earth's perspective, appeared reversed. Perspective matters here more than anything else. What looks like violation from one angle resolves into compliance when geometry is fully considered. The backward tail was not defiance. It was delay. But delay, like alignment, feels meaningful when stripped of context. This is where anomaly becomes a psychological event rather than a physical one. The data itself remains consistent with known forces. The unease arises from the mismatch between expectation and observation. We expect the universe to behave legibly, to conform to patterns once they are learned. When it does not, even temporarily, we feel destabilized. This destabilization is not purely intellectual. It reaches into how we understand our place. We rely on regularity to orient ourselves. Predictable skies, repeating motions, laws that hold. When something deviates, it reminds us that our frameworks are provisional, dependent on conditions we do not control. 3I Atlas produced such reminders repeatedly, not through any single dramatic feature, but through the accumulation of subtle dissonances, polarization too strong, tails misaligned, chemistry inverted, geometry coincidental. None of these required extraordinary explanation. But together, they created an atmosphere in which ordinary explanations felt strained. This strain is dangerous territory. It is where speculation feels justified, where imagination slips into the gaps left by uncertainty, where the idea of intelligence appears not because it is supported, but because it resolves discomfort. An intelligent explanation promises coherence. It suggests that anomalies are not random, but purposeful, that they fit together because someone arranged them. But coherence achieved this way is false. It trades one discomfort for another, deeper one. It replaces uncertainty with illusion. The polarization of 3I Atlas does not point toward machinery. It points toward material history, toward dust shaped by environments we have not sampled directly, toward the limits of extrapolating from local examples. The backward tail does not signal rebellion against physics. It reveals the sensitivity of appearance to circumstance. Change the angle, change the wind, change the grain size. The pattern shifts. What is unsettling is not that these anomalies exist. It is that they resist collapsing into a single explanation that feels satisfying. This resistance mirrors something fundamental about existence itself. We search for alignment between cause and meaning. We want effects to tell us why they happened. But often, effects tell us only that they did. 3i Atlas does not offer us a lesson encoded in light. It offers us evidence that complexity does not require intention, and that unfamiliar outcomes do not imply hidden actors. The existential tension arises when we realize how easily we reach for actors anyway, how quickly we attribute agency to resolve unease, how uncomfortable we are with a universe that produces strangeness without explanation. Yet this is the universe we inhabit. Light scatters off dust shaped by ancient processes. Particles move under forces indifferent to expectation. Structures appear reversed when viewed from limited angles. None of this is staged. None of it waits for comprehension. 3i Atlas passed through our instruments and our imaginations alike. The data it left behind challenges models, but it also challenges restraint. It asks whether we can allow anomalies to remain anomalies, without elevating them into messages. To sit with that question is uncomfortable. It leaves us without narrative closure, without confirmation that what we saw meant something beyond itself, but perhaps that is the most honest outcome. The object did not come to explain itself. It came, briefly, to be seen imperfectly, and in that imperfection, it reflected something back to us, not intelligence elsewhere, but our own difficulty accepting a universe that does not arrange itself around our need for meaning. When uncertainty refuses to settle, it begins to take on voices, not answers, but figures who stand at the boundary and speak into the quiet. One of those voices belongs to Avi Loeb. He does not enter this story as a conclusion, but as a character shaped by tension, a physicist trained in the most conservative traditions of astrophysics, yet publicly willing to ask questions that many of his colleagues prefer to leave unspoken, not because the questions are forbidden, but because they are destabilizing. Loeb's presence in discussions of interstellar objects did not begin with 3i Atlas. It emerged earlier, when the first confirmed interstellar object displayed behaviors that strained existing models. At that moment, he articulated something many felt, but did not say aloud. If an explanation seems incomplete, it should not be protected from scrutiny simply because it is comfortable. This position is often misunderstood. Loeb does not claim that interstellar objects are alien technology. He claims that the possibility should not be excluded a priori. That intelligence, if it exists elsewhere, would also produce artifacts. And that artifacts, unlike biological organisms, might survive long enough to drift between stars. This is not an argument for belief. It is an argument against premature dismissal. In the context of 3i Atlas, Loeb's role becomes symbolic. He embodies the tension between caution and curiosity, between maintaining scientific norms and expanding them. His voice is amplified not because it is dominant, but because it occupies a rare position, openly speculative, while insisting on empirical standards. This combination unsettles people. Science is built on skepticism, but it is also built on shared boundaries. Certain questions are deferred not because they are impossible, but because they threaten coherence. They force a reckoning with assumptions that usually remain invisible. The alien hypothesis functions here not as a claim, but as a stress test. When Loeb suggests that some anomalies might be consistent with technology, he is not saying they are. He is asking whether our frameworks are flexible enough to recognize such a thing if it were ever encountered, or whether cultural discomfort would prevent recognition entirely. This question lands differently depending on where one stands. For some, it feels like contamination, the intrusion of science fiction into a domain that has worked hard to remain sober. For others, it feels like honesty, an acknowledgement that intelligence is a physical process, not a metaphysical one. and that its products would obey physical laws just like everything else. The reaction to Loeb reveals something important, not about aliens, but about us. We are deeply invested in the idea that the universe is either empty of intelligence or filled with it in ways that remain forever inaccessible. Both positions preserve human centrality. In one, we are alone and therefore special. In the other, others exist but are unreachable, preserving our isolation. The idea that intelligence might leave traces that drift into our observational range disrupts both comforts. It suggests neither solitude nor narrative distance, but proximity without relationship. This is where existential discomfort sharpens. If an object like 3I Atlas were artificial, it would not necessarily arrive with intent toward us. It might be debris, a failed probe, a discarded structure, something that has outlived its purpose, if it ever had one. That possibility is unsettling not because it implies contact, but because it implies indifference. Loeb has pointed out that human technology already produces artifacts capable of leaving the solar system over long timescales. Such objects could drift far from their origins. There is nothing in physics that forbids this. The question is not whether it is possible, but whether it is likely. Probability, however, is a treacherous guide when sample sizes are small. 3I Atlas does not provide evidence of technology. Its anomalies can be explained through natural processes, even if those processes are not yet fully understood. Loeb himself acknowledges this. His argument is not that the alien hypothesis fits better, but that it should remain on the table until evidence rules it out. This position is often caricatured as sensationalism. In reality, it is a challenge to epistemic comfort. What makes the alien hypothesis compelling to some is not its plausibility, but its narrative power. It converts coincidence into intention. It transforms anomalies into features. It replaces the unease of randomness with the familiarity of agency. Agency is easier to sit with than indifference. There is also a deeper layer. The alien hypothesis externalizes responsibility. If anomalies are caused by intelligence, then our confusion is justified. We are dealing with something beyond us. If anomalies are natural, then our confusion reflects the limits of our understanding. One explanation flatters, the other humbles. Loeb's insistence on considering intelligence as a possibility forces a confrontation with humility on two fronts. Either we are not alone and not central, or we are alone and still not central, surrounded by processes that exceed our comprehension. Neither option offers comfort. The concept of the dark forest often enters discussions at this point. The idea that advanced civilizations remain silent out of self-preservation, hiding in a universe where visibility invites danger. Loeb has referenced this framework not as evidence, but as context, a way to think about why intelligence might be detectable only indirectly, if at all. The dark forest is not science. It is philosophy. It explores fear, strategy, and survival at cosmic scale. Its relevance lies not in prediction, but in reflection. It asks what kind of universe we imagine when faced with silence. In the case of 3I Atlas, the dark forest does not explain anything. It only sharpens the contrast between what we know and what we fear to imagine. The object did not signal. It did not maneuver. It did not exhibit controlled behavior. It passed. And yet, the idea of intelligence lingered, not because the data demanded it, but because the mind seeks resolution. Loeb's role, then, is less about aliens and more about permission. Permission to ask questions that sit at the edge of what science currently handles well. Permission to admit uncertainty without rushing to closure. This permission is unsettling because it removes the safety net of consensus. In traditional science, anomalies are either absorbed into existing frameworks or dismissed as error. Rarely are they allowed to remain open-ended for long. Funding cycles, publication pressures, and public communication all favor resolution. Loeb resists this pressure, sometimes clumsily, sometimes provocatively. His critics argue that speculation distracts from rigorous work. His supporters argue that rigidity risks blindness. Both positions have merit. What matters for this story is not who is right, but what the debate reveals. It reveals that the alien hypothesis functions as a mirror. It reflects our anxieties about meaning, uniqueness, and relevance. If intelligence exists elsewhere, then our significance is contextual, not absolute. If it does not, then our existence is an accident in a vast, indifferent universe. Either way, the universe does not bend toward us. 3I Atlas becomes a stage on which this tension plays out. The object itself remains silent. The arguments accumulate around it. There is something almost theatrical about it. A cast of interpretations gathers around a point of data that refuses to speak. The louder the interpretations become, the clearer it is that the object is not the source of the noise. We are. Loeb's willingness to voice the alien hypothesis exposes a fault line between two approaches to the unknown. One prioritizes containment. The other prioritizes openness. Both claim to protect science. Both fear different failures. Containment fears ridicule and erosion of credibility. Openness fears stagnation and missed discovery. Neither fear is trivial. But there is an existential layer beneath them. A fear of being wrong in a universe that does not correct us gently. A fear of constructing meaning where none exists. A fear of missing meaning where it does. 3I Atlas does not resolve this fear. It intensifies it by passing through without explanation. In that sense, the alien hypothesis is not about aliens. It is about how we cope with uncertainty when the stakes feel cosmic. It is about whether we can tolerate not knowing without inventing answers that soothe us. Loeb stands at that edge, insisting that discomfort is not a flaw, but a signal. That the boundaries of inquiry should be tested, even if they hold. This does not mean abandoning rigor. It means acknowledging that rigor without humility can become dogma. The universe does not care whether we are cautious or bold. It unfolds regardless. Our choices shape only our understanding, not the processes themselves. 3I Atlas has already left. The debate remains. In the end, the alien hypothesis survives not because it is supported, but because it addresses a human need, the need for coherence in the face of indifference. Loeb gives that need a voice, not to satisfy it, but to examine it. And perhaps that examination is the most valuable outcome, not a conclusion about intelligence elsewhere, but a clearer view of ourselves standing at the edge of what we know, deciding how much uncertainty we are willing to endure without retreating into myth. The object passed through. The questions did not. They linger, not because 3I Atlas demands answers, but because we do. Questions linger longer than objects. They do not follow trajectories. They settle, quietly, into the spaces where certainty once felt sufficient. At some point, speculation must face a harder discipline. Not dismissal, but accounting. If something extraordinary is proposed, the evidence must exceed the gravity of the claim. This is not conservatism. It is survival. Science advances not by imagination alone, but by the careful separation of what could be from what can be shown. In the case of 3I Atlas, that separation remains intact. For an object to be plausibly artificial, certain criteria would need to be met. Not philosophical ones, physical ones. Observable markers that resist natural explanation even after generous modeling. Patterns that persist across datasets. Behaviors that imply control rather than consequence. None of these have been demonstrated. There was no sustained non-gravitational acceleration inconsistent with known outgassing processes. While subtle forces may have acted on the object, They fall within ranges already observed in comets with unusual compositions. There was no abrupt change in velocity suggestive of propulsion, no directional correction, no deviation that required intent. There were no structured emissions, no narrowband radio signals, no modulated light, no repeating patterns that would suggest encoding. The electromagnetic environment around 3I Atlas remained quiet, indistinguishable from background noise. Once natural activity was accounted for, there was no mechanical regularity, no rotation rate demanding artificial balance, no geometry that exceeded what natural fragmentation and erosion can produce over long timescales. The nucleus remained unresolved. But absence of resolution is not evidence of design. It is evidence of distance. Each anomaly, when examined closely, admits at least one natural explanation, often more than one. These explanations may be incomplete. They may rely on models still under refinement. But incompleteness is not insufficiency. The burden of proof does not shift simply because explanation is difficult. This is where many arguments falter. They rely on post hoc improbability. The claim that a configuration feels too unlikely to be natural, therefore must be artificial. But improbability is not evidence. It is a reflection of limited intuition operating in high-dimensional spaces. We are poor judges of rarity when dealing with systems that unfold across billions of years and trillions of objects. Events that feel miraculous in human terms can be mundane at galactic scale. Coincidences multiply when the sample size is immense. 3I Atlas feels singular because our exposure is limited. With only a few interstellar objects observed, each one carries disproportionate narrative weight. As detection improves, this weight will redistribute. Patterns may emerge, or strangeness may become ordinary. Until then, caution is not timidity. It is proportionality. There is also a methodological concern that cannot be ignored. Extraordinary claims have a tendency to harden prematurely. Once framed publicly, they shape interpretation. Data is re-examined through the lens of expectation. Ambiguities are resolved selectively. This is not malice. It is human cognition under pressure. Science counters this tendency through standards that are intentionally slow. Replication, independent verification, conservative thresholds. These practices frustrate impatience, but they protect against error. In the case of 3I Atlas, no independent line of evidence converges on artificiality. The data does not point in that direction consistently. It merely fails to point cleanly elsewhere. Failure to point is not direction. There is a deeper reason why the evidence is still not enough. One that extends beyond this object. It has to do with how intelligence manifests in the universe, if it manifests at all. Human technology is recognizable because it is embedded in context. Roads connect to cities. Signals repeat. Artifacts cluster. Even our debris forms patterns, concentrated around our planet and its orbits. An isolated object, stripped of context, is almost impossible to classify as technological with confidence. Especially if it is old, especially if it is degraded, especially if it was not designed to communicate. The universe is hostile to preservation of detail. Radiation erases surfaces, collisions deform structures, time dissolves, intention into residue. An artifact, drifting for billions of years, would not announce itself clearly. It would resemble debris. This creates an asymmetry that is difficult to resolve. Natural objects can appear artificial through coincidence and complexity. Artificial objects, over time, come to resemble natural ones. Without context, distinction collapses. This is not an argument against the possibility of extraterrestrial technology. It is an argument for epistemic humility, for recognizing the limits of inference when evidence is fragmentary and history is long. 3I Atlas sits squarely within those limits. There is also the problem of expectation bias. Once the idea of artificiality enters the discourse, it alters the emotional landscape. Every anomaly feels charged. Every uncertainty feels suggestive. Restraint begins to feel like avoidance. But restraint is not avoidance. It is alignment with the scale of the question. We must also confront the role of misinformation. During the observation window, claims circulated that exceeded the data dramatically. Assertions of maneuvers, of cloaking, of deliberate concealment. None of these were supported. Most relied on misunderstandings of basic physics or misinterpretations of images that were never observational to begin with. These claims do real harm, not because they are wrong, but because they erode trust in the process by which knowledge is built. They replace uncertainty with spectacle. The story of Three-Eye Atlas does not require spectacle. It is already extraordinary without embellishment. The temptation to declare more than can be shown often arises from discomfort with ambiguity. We want answers that feel proportionate to the scale of the encounter. A 7-billion-year-old object passing through our system seems to demand a conclusion of equal magnitude. But the universe does not negotiate with our sense of drama. There is an existential discomfort here that is easy to miss. If the evidence is not enough, then we are left without closure. The object has gone. The data is finite. The questions remain open. This openness is not satisfying. It does not resolve into awe or fear cleanly. It leaves us suspended between explanation and ignorance. Yet this suspension may be the most honest position available. It acknowledges that our understanding is provisional, that we are early observers in a long timeline of discovery. That many questions will outlive us. There is humility in this, but not resignation. The absence of evidence for artificiality does not mean the universe is empty of intelligence. It means this object does not provide a reliable signal of it. These are different claims. We must also recognize the asymmetry of error. Declaring artificiality prematurely is far more damaging than delaying recognition. A false positive reverberates through culture, distorting priorities and eroding credibility. A delayed recognition, while regrettable, preserves the integrity of the process. Science is structured to minimize false positives, even at the cost of missed opportunities. This bias is intentional. Three-Eye Atlas tests this structure not by threatening to break it, but by highlighting why it exists. The evidence is not enough, because the universe is under no obligation to present itself clearly. Because objects can be strange without being designed. Because coincidence at scale feels different than coincidence in daily life. And because meaning, in the cosmic sense, is not something that arrives with data. It is something we construct carefully, knowing that construction does not alter reality. Three-Eye Atlas does not answer the question of intelligence elsewhere. It does not refute it either. It simply refuses to carry that burden. In doing so, it reminds us of something quietly important. That knowledge advances not through certainty alone, but through the disciplined management of doubt. That patience is not passivity, and that sometimes the most responsible conclusion is not a declaration, but a pause. The object has already moved on. What remains is our response. Whether we can tolerate not knowing without inventing answers may be a more revealing measure of our maturity as observers than any conclusion we might have drawn from its passage. The evidence is still not enough, and that, perhaps, is exactly what this encounter was meant to show. Doubt, when left unresolved, tends to migrate. It looks for new containers, new language, new threats it can inhabit. As attention drifted away from what Three-Eye Atlas might be, it latched onto what it might do. The phrase planetary defense entered the conversation quietly at first, as it always does. Through internal coordination channels and procedural checklists. It was not a reaction. It was a routine. Planetary defense is not a shield. It is a protocol. a framework for communication and observation designed to ensure that if an object poses a risk, information moves faster than rumor. It exists because Earth occupies a dynamic environment, not a protected one. Debris moves, orbits shift, impacts, while rare, are real. 3I Atlas did not qualify as a threat. Its trajectory never intersected Earth's orbit. Its closest approach remained comfortably distant, separated by a span so large that gravitational influence was negligible. There was no scenario, even under generous uncertainty, in which collision was plausible. This was established early and reaffirmed repeatedly, but clarity does not always survive translation. When observational campaigns intensified, coordination expanded, alerts were issued, data was shared, international networks aligned their efforts. From the inside, this looked like efficiency. From the outside, it looked like escalation. The International Asteroid Warning Network, often abbreviated in technical discussions, was activated as a matter of procedure. This network exists to consolidate observations, refine trajectories, and prevent miscommunication. It is designed to function quietly, precisely, so panic does not fill informational gaps. Ironically, its very existence became a catalyst for misunderstanding. Headlines began to appear that framed the situation as defensive rather than observational. Words like monitoring, tracking, and response were stripped of context and reassembled into narratives of threat. The idea that something interstellar required defense took hold, despite the absence of danger. This is not a failure of science. It is a collision between institutional language and public intuition. Planetary defense sounds martial. It implies enemies. It suggests intent. But in practice, it is closer to meteorology than warfare. It predicts. It assesses. It communicates probabilities. It does not prepare weapons. It prepares understanding. Yet the presence of the word defense was enough to awaken deeper anxieties. Interstellar objects already carry narrative weight. They arrive from elsewhere. They resist familiarity. When paired with language associated with protection and threat, they become vessels for fear. This fear is not irrational. It is ancient. Human history is marked by vulnerability to the sky. Impacts have shaped evolution. Climate shifts, triggered by extraterrestrial events, have altered the course of life. The sky has never been a neutral backdrop. It has always been a source of both wonder and risk. But 3I Atlas did not activate planetary defense because it was dangerous. It activated it because it was new. Novelty is itself a kind of threat to systems built on pattern recognition. When something does not fit established categories, procedures expand to accommodate uncertainty. This expansion can be misread as alarm. What unfolded instead was a familiar cycle. Information moved faster than interpretation. Social media amplified fragments. Context dissolved. Speculation flourished in the vacuum between technical statements and emotional reception. Suddenly, the object was not just strange. It was framed as watched, tracked, prepared for. None of this reflected reality. The real work happening behind the scenes was methodical and calm. Orbital solutions were refined. Observation windows were scheduled. Risk assessments were updated and repeatedly returned the same conclusion: no hazard. But reassurance is less compelling than suspense. There is something deeply revealing about how quickly attention shifted from cosmic indifference to imagined confrontation. It suggests that we are more comfortable imagining danger than insignificance. Threat implies relevance. Indifference does not. 3I Atlas, as a physical object, posed no challenge to Earth. But as a symbol, it destabilized something quieter. The assumption that we are spectators rather than participants in a universe that does not center us. Planetary defense became a screen onto which this discomfort was projected. The idea that humanity might need to defend itself against something from interstellar space restores a sense of agency. It casts us as actors rather than witnesses. It allows fear to replace humility. This is not accidental. Existential unease often seeks refuge in concrete problems. It is easier to imagine impact scenarios than to sit with the knowledge that most of the universe passes by without regard for us. It is easier to prepare for threats than to accept irrelevance. But the truth of the matter is simpler and more unsettling. 3I Atlas was not an adversary. It was not even an event, in the human sense. It was a transient intersection between trajectories that have nothing to do with us. Planetary defense protocols did exactly what they were designed to do. They assessed. They communicated. They confirmed safety. They closed the loop. The panic arose elsewhere. It arose in the space where language failed to convey scale, where the extraordinary was mistaken for the dangerous, where the unfamiliar was interpreted as hostile. This misinterpretation reveals something important about our relationship with the cosmos. We oscillate between two extremes, romanticization and fear. When wonder fades, fear often fills the gap. But neither extreme captures reality. The universe is not staging encounters for our benefit or our destruction. It is unfolding processes at scales that dwarf intention. Objects pass. Systems evolve. Outcomes are indifferent. 3I Atlas did not test our defenses. It tested our ability to distinguish procedure from threat, and observation from reaction. The irony is that planetary defense, as a concept, exists to protect against rare but real dangers. By misapplying it symbolically to a harmless object, we dilute its meaning and distort its purpose. This distortion is not trivial. It reflects a deeper impatience with uncertainty, a desire to resolve cosmic ambiguity by framing it as conflict. But conflict implies symmetry, opponents, stakes, resolution. There was no conflict here. The object came and went. The Earth remained unchanged. The only lasting impact was on our imagination. In that sense, the panic says less about 3I Atlas and more about us, about how quickly we default to narratives that place humanity at the center, even when the data suggests we are peripheral. Planetary defense was never about defending against this object. It was about ensuring that our instruments, our networks, and our interpretations remained aligned. When viewed this way, the episode becomes instructive rather than alarming. It shows how easily language can reframe reality, how institutional terms can be misread as existential threats, how our need for meaning can distort our perception of risk. 3I Atlas did not threaten Earth, but it did expose how fragile our sense of orientation can be when confronted with something that does not acknowledge us. The object passed through. The procedures concluded. The panic subsided. What lingers is the question of how we respond the next time something unfamiliar enters our awareness. Whether we will default to fear, or allow ourselves to remain observers in a universe that does not require our participation. Planetary defense did its job. The challenge now is whether our narratives can do the same. Stories can protect us, or they can expose how little protection we have ever really had, what truly passed us by. When 3I Atlas crossed the inner solar system, was not a hidden danger and not a secret message. What passed us by was the illusion that the universe will ever slow down long enough to explain itself. The object came and went. That part is simple. A fragment from elsewhere swept through the gravitational well of the sun, left a brief, turbulent signature in our instruments, and faded back into the general background of the galaxy. Its arc is finished, relative to us. It will never return in any form we would recognize. The story is less simple, because it has no clean ending. Science, at its core, is not a library of answers. It is a sequence of attempts. It is the record of a species trying, within a very small window of time, to understand processes that began long before it appeared and will continue long after it disappears. 3i Atlas intersected that sequence briefly, and then it moved beyond our reach. In that sense, the object was an event only for us. For the galaxy, it was continuity. One more piece of debris moving through a gravitational field that has bent countless paths before and will bend countless paths after. There was no before and after for the universe, only for the observers who happened to be watching. This is easy to say. It is harder to feel. We prefer stories in which encounters matter, in which a rare alignment between our instruments and an ancient object must mean something, in which the timing is not just convenient, but significant. We want the universe to acknowledge us with more than indifference. 3i Atlas did not do that. It moved as if we were not here, because in any meaningful cosmic sense, we are not. Our presence is a local fluctuation on a small planet around an unremarkable star. The object's path would have been the same if no telescope had ever been built. The coma would have formed. The gases would have escaped. The dust would have scattered. The polarization would have been extreme. The tail would have twisted and seemed to point the wrong way from some other vantage point, somewhere else. What passed us by was an opportunity we imagined, the chance to hold the universe still for a moment and demand clarity. Instead, it offered something else, a test of how we respond when clarity does not arrive. Some chose to inflate the encounter into proof of intention. Alien ships, probes, warnings. Others chose to shrink it into a curiosity, a passing headline. A third response, quieter and less visible, was to accept that the object could remain unresolved without being any less real. That third response is harder to sustain. We live in an age that promises explanation on demand. Questions feel incomplete without answers. Search bars do not like silence. When information runs out, imagination keeps going, and it is difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. 3i Atlas marked a boundary between those two regimes. On one side, data. On the other, story. The data will not change now. The spectra, the light curves, the polarization measurements, the astrometric positions, all of them are fixed. They occupy archives the way fossils occupy rock. We can return to them, reinterpret them, build new models around them, but we cannot add to them. The story, however, is still moving. It will evolve as new interstellar objects are discovered, as instruments improve, as theories are refined. What looks anomalous now may become typical. What feels unique may fade into a larger pattern. One day, students may look back at our confusion with the same detached curiosity with which we examine early sketches of planetary orbits. Not because we were foolish, but because we were early. That is perhaps the most important perspective this encounter offers. We are not late arrivals to a finished universe. We are early arrivals to our own understanding of it. Our models are first drafts, written under poor lighting. 3i Atlas exposed the roughness of those drafts. It reminded us that the first few examples of any new category will always feel strange. A single interstellar object can never be representative. Even a handful cannot map a population reliably. What we called anomalies may simply be the first hints of diversity. When we speak of what truly passed us by, then we are not talking about a lost artifact or a missed danger. We are talking about the deeper realization that understanding is not guaranteed just because we want it. We watched an object older than Earth move through our system on a path shaped by stars that may no longer exist. And we did not decode it. We did not reduce it to certainty. We did not extract a message. Instead, we were left with gaps. The moment of greatest activity was hidden behind the sun. The nucleus remained unresolved. The internal structure remained inaccessible. The origin remained, at best, vaguely constrained. The age was an inference wrapped in more inferences. These gaps are not romantic. They are not framed or illuminated. They simply exist as blank segments in an otherwise detailed record. And yet, they are where the most important questions live. What does it mean to be a species that encounters something vast and cannot finish the sentence it starts to write about it? What does it mean to recognize that some stories, even when real, will never belong to us completely? Most of human history has unfolded under skies that felt knowable. The stars were points. The planets wandered. But, predictably, comets came and went, terrifying, and then explained. We grew used to the idea that persistence of observation leads to comprehension. 3i Atlas is a small reminder that this belief has limits. Some events will always outrun our capacity to measure them. Some objects will cross our path once and never again. Some datasets will remain insufficient, no matter how sophisticated our analysis becomes. This is not a failure of science. It is a fact of existence. There is another sense in which something else passed us by. Not out there, but here, while debates focused on anomalies and hypotheticals, a quieter realization sat largely untouched, that the universe is full of objects like this, moving through the darkness uninterrupted, that our detection of any one of them is a rare convergence of technology, attention, and chance. We sometimes speak as if the cosmos has only recently become interesting, as though its mysteries have intensified along with our telescopes. The reality is the reverse. The universe has been doing this all along. Interstellar fragments have been passing through the solar system since long before there were eyes to see them. They have cut through the orbits of forming planets, skimmed atmospheres, fallen into stars, or grazed past unnoticed. Hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of such crossings have come and gone without record. 3i Atlas was not the first. It was simply one of the first we were capable of noticing. What passed us by, across all those earlier crossings, was awareness itself. Our species occupies a thin sliver of time in which noticing is possible. We have built instruments that can intercept photons traveling for years, millennia, sometimes longer. We have charted the motions of bodies that do not care about our existence. This ability feels natural because we were born into it. But it is not natural. It is fragile. It depends on coordinated societies, on surplus energy, on fragile infrastructures that could fail for reasons as mundane as economic instability or as catastrophic as planetary crisis. If those supports vanish, the sky does not change. Only our capacity to interpret it does. One day, if our line ends, there will be no one here to track interstellar objects. They will continue to pass. They will continue to release gas in distant sunlight. Their tails will continue to form, bend, and vanish into space. We will have passed them by. This is not meant as a warning. It is an alignment. It places 3i Atlas not as a unique visitor, but as a brief intersection between two processes. One, cosmic and unconcerned. One, local and temporary. The first will continue. The second is not guaranteed, meaning, under such conditions, cannot be imported from the outside. It cannot be expected to arrive on the surface of an object or encoded in its motion. It must be made. Cautiously. Here, between observers who understand that their time is short, when people talk about 3i Atlas, they will eventually stop arguing about whether it was natural or artificial. That distinction, while important scientifically, does not touch the deeper question, what it revealed about the way we face the unknown. It showed how quickly we reach for narratives that protect us from indifference, how readily we transform gaps in knowledge into stages for our fears and hopes, how hard it is to accept that some chapters in the universe's history will always be closed to us. The ghost at the heart of this story is not the object, it is us, moving through a universe that will not remember we were here, leaving behind a brief pattern of observations and questions. recorded in a thin layer of data and language on a small planet. 3I Atlas passed through our system and continued on. It did not turn. It did not look back. It did not leave a trace that could not be washed away by time and distance. What truly passed us by was the chance to believe, honestly, that the cosmos is arranged for our understanding. It is not. And yet, within that indifference, we look up, we build instruments, we argue, we speculate, we learn to say, without comfort but with clarity, that sometimes there is no message, and that the absence of a message is not an insult. It is simply how things are. The object is gone. Its data is fixed. The models will change. New objects will come. New ghosts will form at the edge of what we can know. What remains, for now, is you, sitting in the dim light with this story, aware that somewhere, far beyond the reach of any telescope we have built, 3I Atlas is still moving through the dark, carrying nothing for us, and taking nothing from us, except perhaps the last traces of a belief that the universe should ever feel obliged to make sense.